feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule!
Welcome back, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. Chris and Dom here. As always, make sure you follow us on all our socials. Like, follow, subscribe, and share all our videos. We're trying to bump those YouTube numbers up, as well as on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And, Chris, we're back on the diamond today.
Wait a second. I thought we were talking about the President Grover Cleveland.
Oh, man, are you serious?
I did the wrong research. Just
You
kidding.
did the right research.
We're talking about Grover Cleveland Alexander, one of the greatest pitchers of his era.
Maybe of all time.
I know.
When you look at some of these stats.
We were talking about that. He really has some ridiculous stats in those late teens. All right.
Bit of a tortured soul, though, as we'll get into.
Very much. Very much.
So, Grover Cleveland Alexander, born February 26, 1887 in Elba, Nebraska, one of 13 kids.
I saw that, which, I mean, that's men of their time.
They talk about dad being a real sex machine. This dude was a factory. He was a sex factory, Chris. He's going to star in a movie with Steve Martin called Cheaper by the Baker's Dozen.
That's beautiful.
6th out of 8 of the kids to survive into adulthood.
Yep.
Dad William, Mom Margaret. His dad was a Democrat and named him after President Grover Cleveland. 2 terms, not consecutive. Grover Cleveland, for those of you history fans of this podcast. He was called Dode by his family, I guess, and he had another famous nickname, Pete, which we'll get into
I was going to
later.
say, which isn't his name, but I saw that and I was like, I have to see why he's nicknamed this.
It was pretty good. Do you want to get into it now, or do you want to?
Yeah.
So I guess during his professional career, what ended up happening was he was a very disheveled person.
Yes.
Not much of a looker. Not very stylish.
Well, and they said that he dressed very just like he didn't care, kind of like that.
Dressed like someone from Nebraska, maybe. I don't know.
All right.
But there were some short film characters in westerns called Alkali Pete and Alkali Pete and Alkali Ike and Mustang Pete.
That's what it was.
That's what it was. And Bill Kellifer, his catcher, was hunting with him in Texas. That he started calling him Alkali Pete.
I was just going to say, he combined these 2 characters into one, and he was just like, this is your new nickname, which had nothing to do with him.
I know, right? All I thought of was that character in the Frogger episode of Seinfeld, Slippery Pete.
Yep.
I need holes, Jerry!
It's so good.
Anyway, so Pete, don't grow... Alex, they called him Alexander the Great. He had all sorts of nicknames.
Yes.
All sorts of nicknames. Growing up I already grew up in rural Nebraska, and I was just like, that's kind of redundant. Just say Nebraska.
Just say Nebraska. You don't have to double down.
A town of 200 people, packs of wild dogs roaming the streets. Worked on a farm, though. Self-sufficient. Called himself an average farm boy with long days of work and short nights of sleep. One of his jobs, he was a corn shucker.
Oh, I saw that.
Which a lot of people attributed to his powerful right wrist and his arguably one of the nastiest curveballs professional baseball's ever seen.
Well, it's one of those things where he obviously wasn't training baseball back then, but he was training on the farm throwing corn.
Like the Wainers almost, you know? It's like, or going out to the tool shed and whacking. They said he honed his control, much like the corn shucking, by throwing rocks at clothespins. And I guess legend has it, his mom would have him throw rocks at chickens for supper. Like he allegedly said he'd give the chickens a running start. And where he starts his professional career, there's a lot of history with throwing rocks at things.
Oh, here we go.
South Philly tradition.
It's a South Philly tradition, guys.
That's pretty amazing, though. It's like, go get us some dinner and grab the rocks.
Yeah. Kill one of those. Just to be clear, that's what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, you got to eat, right?
You got to eat.
Who needs an axe when you have rocks?
That's true. He's decapitating these chickens with it.
He's just sawing them off. Can I have an axe? Be a man, Grover.
Yep.
Graduates from St. Paul High School. His dad actually wanted him to study law.
Yeah, he wanted him to do, because he graduated high school, he wanted him to do further education, and he ended up digging potholes for a while too. But during this time, he's playing semi-pro ball.
And he was a lineman for the telephone company, so he's good at digging too.
Yep.
He digs himself into a lot of holes, as we'll discuss later, personally. But yeah, he said he could play on weekends. When he first started, though, I had read he had like almost no. He just thought, this is as far as I'm going to go with baseball.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a telephone lineman. I don't think I can play with the best of them.
Well, especially in that era where you're like, well, I mean, I'm doing this for fun.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there's a future in it, you know?
No, this is a Saturday night type of thing, you know? He eventually signs with Galesburg of the Illinois-Missouri League in 1909. All he does is go 15-8 with a 1.36 ERA.
And he's 20 at this point.
Yeah.
So
22.
he's 22. So he's a little bit older than you would think of somebody getting into that. But I feel like in this first season, people saw like his numbers, because obviously you can't watch them unless you're there.
No.
And they were like, those are some really good numbers.
One of his coaches like had mockingly said, "You can just throw it wherever the hell you want to." Mm-hmm. And it's like his nickname in this league was Down and Away, because that's where the balls would always go. And he's like, you can't run into too much trouble if you're throwing them down and away.
Yeah. Well, he almost ended his career
Well, here we go.
super early, so he's rounding the bases and gets struck in the face by a ball.
Mind you, this is 3 days after he threw his first and only no-hitter.
Yep.
So this is some bad luck.
I don't know if you saw this, but he actually drank some whiskey that one of the guys had set out for Joe Boo.
Yep.
I'm just kidding.
Grover needs a refill.
That's right. But like literally, you almost saw the end of one of the greatest pitchers ever before it started.
Yeah, the baseball hit him in the right temple.
Yep.
He was out for 36 to 56 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's a nice long nap. And then because of this, when he came to, he developed double vision. And not like the good kind of double vision, like Foreigner, the
Thank
bad
you.
kind.
Yep.
You know, the good kind where like you put on double vision on a jukebox at a dive bar in East Tucson, and a 46-year-old woman compliments you on your music choice, and then she's draining your balls in the alley. That type of double vision.
We've all been there.
We've all been there. We've all been there. But fall, winter, and spring in 1910, he still got the double vision. Still got the double vision. And then one day it just magically went away.
Yeah, I saw that, which is weird, but I wonder if it... it's hard to even say how that would happen, but it's just like, okay.
I mean, that's like 1910s medical, like, I think Jesus fixed you.
No, I think you have to drink it away.
You have to drink it away. Yes, it has to go away, and there are some that will point to this possibly causing a future medical condition of his.
Oh. So 1910, he ends up playing for the Syracuse Stars in New York. He goes 29-11.
Tell me about the complete games.
So he pitches 40 games. And then what was his complete? 38?
31 complete games.
It's insane.
15 shutouts. God.
So now, and this is the thing, in Syracuse, in New York, you have a lot of eyes on you.
Yeah.
And I feel like actual teams are like, oh, we're going to actually use this guy. Go pick him up. Phillies go and pick him up for $750.
Yeah. $500 I read.
Oh, 500. Yeah.
So they were scouting another player that they signed to a big deal. It's funny because when he went to Syracuse, I had read Indianapolis had signed him before, but they were so scared of him developing the double vision again that they just like sold him to Syracuse.
Yeah.
And goes to Philadelphia and just an instant success.
Yes.
I mean, because for the time, taller kind of guy, 6'1", lanky. He's pretty lanky and skinny, but God, that sidearm delivery with that smooth control, not like a big train Walter Johnson overpowering fastball, but a good fastball. But his curve, man,
A Greg Maddux, or you know what I mean. And you said this where you were like, he can play in any league just because of his control, or any era. I'm sorry.
If you can put it where you want to. It doesn't matter who you're facing.
Low and away.
Down and away. That's my porno nickname. I let him down and then I go away.
So,
do you realize that Serrano would just have fits against this guy?
Oh my God.
He'd just be like, fuck you, Jobu, out the gate.
I could do this myself.
So 1911, he's with the Phils. And You could make the argument he has the best rookie season by any pitcher in Major League Baseball history.
I would say that too. He matches up with his catcher, who we brought up earlier, who gave him that nickname, and they proceed to play 250 games together,
which is crazy.
So, yeah, that is a huge amount for a pitcher-catcher combo.
Yeah, a good battery.
Yes.
There you go. So his rookie year, he leads Major League Baseball in wins with 28. Also leads in shutouts with 7. He had 4 consecutive shutouts
I know.
this year. Led the NL in complete games with 31, and a rookie record 227 strikeouts, which was not broken until Herb Score of the Indians in 55. Oh, he even got 3 saves, I had read. So just on his off days, like, coach, you need me? I got you.
He was 4th in ERA, so like he literally came in and was one of the best pitchers, if not the best, as a rookie.
Yeah, and he came almost essentially out of nowhere. Like, he's like Roy Hobbs almost, like coming from the Midwest, just showing up, playing in Philly.
Well, Philly, like you said, they didn't even scout. They weren't even scouting him originally. So, like him coming in, nobody knew who he was.
Yeah.
You know.
The following season, 19 wins. He led the NL in innings pitched. Had 25 complete games, and this is an era of Phillies baseball where they're actually decent. Like, they're actually competitive. There are some strange and disturbing years before 1980, as we discussed with Schmitty, but this little window here where old Pete is at the top of the rotation, they're a good baseball team.
Yep.
The next 2 years combined, 49 and 23. He has 55 complete games in 2 years.
In 2 years. Yeah.
There are guys who don't. There are you could take a group of Hall of Famers, like 3 of them. They don't have that in a career. Within the last,
seriously,
decade.
It's wild.
Over 661 innings pitched. Not a huge strikeout guy. And I think a lot of that is attributed to that breaking stuff is like, I'm just going to pitch to contact and you're going to hit a little nubber to the second baseman.
It's more democratic.
Of course.
Who was he named after? A Democratic president. This is baseball.
He hated the designated hitter. Maybe the one who gave him all those problems was Tim Robbins' grandma.
That's true.
In 1913, he led the NL in shutouts, though. And then in 1914, he led the NL in wins, complete games, strikeouts, and innings pitched.
I want to say this. 1914 to 1920, his records and how dominant he was compared to other pitchers in this era is ridiculous.
Literally the only guy in the National League who could touch him was Christy Mathewson. And we'll probably bring him up at the end of the podcast. And anyway, in 1915, this is... I mean, what more can you say? He wins this first
Triple Crown
as a pitcher, where you lead in wins, strikeouts, and innings pitched.
He also was number 1 ERA.
Or ERA, excuse me. Yeah, ERA, sorry. So 31 wins, 1.22 ERA. 36. He had more complete games than wins. He starts what he finishes. Grover Cleveland Alexander is not a starter. He is a finisher starter.
That's correct. And
he's a golden god of Philadelphia.
And this is when the Phillies really put it together. They win their first pennant. They go on to the World Series.
I did want to say their new manager, Pat Moran, was his former catcher. So he knew kind of, how to handle him.
Yep.
As far as
because he has a bit of problems.
The Phillies go 90 and 62 and they win the pennant. Over the Boston Braves, leading over 7 games, and they make and we actually talked about this World Series in a previous episode. They make the 1915 World Series against Boston in their golden outfield.
Yep, against Boston, and he wins 1 game.
He wins game 1 out the gate.
Guess what? The Phillies didn't win another World Series game for 65 years.
They had to wait for Schmitty and that wonderful haircut of Pete Rose to get it done.
It's kind of ridiculous when you think of such a storied franchise really not doing anything for 65 years.
And those were dark to stare. That was like Weekend at Bernie's. That was the sunglasses era for Phillies baseball.
That was really the dark ages, if you know what I mean.
So he wins game 1. I didn't want to add complete game, 1 run on 8 hits. He lost game 3 because Duffy Lewis singled in the top of the 9th to score Harry Hooper, 2 of the guys from that episode 228. Yep. And then There's a little controversy around Game 5 because they were going to throw him out there and pitch. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the talk was he didn't end up pitching because he was too tired, which is generally the accepted narrative. But towards the end of his career, people started talking and making things up. There's people who are accusing him of coming in hammered and being too drunk to play Game 5, which has been pretty much disproven. But
this is when, in this year, because I feel like that happened, this is when people were like, oh, he's an alcoholic. So even if that wasn't the case, they were like, yeah, but he is hard on the sauce.
He was a functional alcoholic.
The best kind.
The best kind. Well, no, it's technically the worst kind because you're kicking ass and no one's like, you don't have a problem. It's like, oh, God, yes, I do. Help me.
Oh, God.
Please help me. My life is in shambles. I'm just throwing complete games every outing.
Yes.
But no, like because from the research I did, he used to be just kind of a beer or two guy with the fellas. And for whatever reason, we start seeing it kind of pick up here.
Yep.
1916, career high 33 wins, 1.55 ERA, 38 complete games for a career high in a season.
Yep.
Career high in shutouts, 16. Career high in innings pitched, 389. Wins the Triple Crown again.
Yep.
The only NL pitcher to go double digits in shutouts.
His stats are so unbelievable. This is what I mean. 14
Like
to 20.
back to back, like that, like by 3. God, what the hell?
I know. I love it. It's so ridiculously good.
What made it incredible, I don't know if you read anything about the Baker Bowl where they played, the stadium. It was one of the most notoriously hitter-friendly parks in the National League.
Yep.
And that he's going out there and doing...
And having the lowest ERA, like he literally had the lowest ERA twice in that ballpark.
But see, he's the perfect type of pitcher for one of those ballparks. Is he's going to keep the ball on the ground. Mm-hmm. He's going to pitch to guys aren't going like if you had sent someone up there throwing 98 gas, somebody's going to make contact and it's going to go a long way.
It's going to go somewhere.
Yeah. So they finished second that year there to Brooklyn.
Yep.
Do not make the World Series. And in 1917, they also finished second to the Giants, but he's having an incredible... He could have won a third Triple Crown this year if it wasn't for a guy who pitched fewer innings than him.
I was going to say, because there was a bit of controversy with that, where like some people thought he should have had it.
I still give it to him.
Yeah.
In my own
book. He should have had Triple Crown back to back to back.
Yeah.
Just to point that out. That's
Triple Crown.
How ridiculously good he was at this time.
30 wins again. Sub 2 ERA at 1.83, 388 innings pitched, and 8 shutouts.
It's insane.
Unbelievable. But since this is, season ends, we're in October 1917. In terms of world events, the Phillies need to make some decisions because there's a war going on in Europe.
Well, and it's interesting because the band Franz Ferdinand comes out. Everybody hates that band so much that it then causes a world war.
Yeah, a bunch of Serbian people do not take kindly to the band Franz Ferdinand.
It's crazy. So the Phillies...
They got to take him out. I'm sorry.
So the Phillies actually end up selling him to the Cubs, and the Philly owner, because they exchanged him for a pitcher-catcher combo, with his catcher, Bill, what was his name? Kellefer, whatever, and $55,000. And what the Phillies owner said, they were just like, we really needed the money. It wasn't...
No, because they're competing with Connie Mack and the Athletics still there. Because they have just come off, the Philadelphia A's have just come off like multiple World Series championships.
Yep.
So they needed the money like to kind of compete with them two-city team. And you don't know if he's going to... You don't know if he's going to be iced for the year and you're going to be paying his fucking salary.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crappy that happens, but, sometimes you can't make a freedom omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Why can't we just stop rock and roll?
God. So he's traded with Bill Kellefer. I love these old names. Traded him to the Cubs on December 11th, 1917 for Mike Prendergast and Pickles Dillhofer.
I was hoping you were bringing up Pickles. Just to be honest, I would call him Pickles Dill.
Do you think he goes... I bet you he looked like the Vlasic stork. He just goes to the ladies like, I can be sweet or sour, whatever you want to, baby.
That's right.
Oh, my God. I got both.
I got both. 1918, he is...
Fantastic. It's the beginning of the year he is.
I was just going to say, he ends up being deployed, but the start of the season, I imagine as a Phillies fan, you're just like, we'll get a bunch of money together to keep him, because you could just see how dominant he was.
2-1, his first 3 starts, all complete games.
Yep.
1.73 ERA, but then he's drafted by the Army. It's funny, though, I had read the Cubs won the pennant that year in 1918, and their pitcher, Jim Vaughn, won the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable that it happened, but since he's drafted by the Army, marries his wife, Amy.
Yeah.
May 31st.
Right before he
deploys.
goes. Yep.
I did read that he had a watch with Old Pete engraved in it. But guess what, Chris? He did not have to hide it in his ass like Christopher Walken.
Which, I mean, it's kind of a rare war story when you hear that.
Yeah, normally I just assume everything is being keistered.
Thank you.
I mean, that's just how it goes.
So he's in France as a sergeant for the 342nd Field Artillery Regiment, and some bad stuff happens because it's war. It's World War I.
Which is like the worst war ever, as far as if you're not familiar with technological advances and carnage, and not even a good soundtrack like Nam.
That's true.
I dare you to compare Over There versus Fortunate Son. Not even close. Not even close.
Nam had the best soundtrack. Let's just be clear.
Far and away. Like, God. Oh, man, I hope I don't die after doing the Charleston. It's like, I've just smoked opium and listened to the Zombies.
Yep.
Bring it on, Charlie. Anyway.
Zombies, not a real band. He gets exposed to mustard gas, and this is what we were kind of referencing with World War I, was mustard gas was so bad that they were like, even though like the world was like, hey, we're going to go back to war, we're not going to use mustard gas anymore.
Well, there was a mustachioed Austrian who was mustard gassed, and he didn't use it on the battlefield. Used a lot of other places, but
That's
not
true.
on the battlefield.
You're right. Excuse me.
But anyway, so he spends 7 weeks at on the Western Front, and it is not quiet because he's working with the howitzers, with artillery.
Yep.
So he ends up going deaf in his left ear. He ends up taking shrapnel there as well.
Yeah, because the shell explodes right next to him. Like, it's crazy to think.
And he ends up kind of jerking his arm up a little, significantly enough, because he has to pull the lanyard so the howitzers go off.
Yep.
So it's like, and obviously the most important and the worst thing that comes out of it, other than him, like, short of dying, he develops horrendous PTSD.
Yeah, so
which isn't diagnosed at the time because nobody knows what they just called it. Shell shock.
They call it shell shock. He has epilepsy with epileptic seizures, which is gonna like haunt him for the rest of his life. Like you were saying, like unless you were so bad you had to be in a hospital, people would almost like be like, "Oh no, you're fine."
And then it's like, but you just keep screaming at night.
Yes, exactly.
Like it's horrible. It's a horrible way to live. And what he kind of started doing, whether it was the ball of the temple, whether it was just some onset of it, in those days, being an epileptic was being thought of like touched by the devil. So it was more socially acceptable in the late teens, 1920s, to be a drunk than an epileptic.
Yep.
Which had to just be even worse for him living his life every day.
Well, they said that everybody thought that his seizures were him being extremely drunk, but his epilepsy was actually exacerbated by his drinking. So it was like that. You know what I mean? Like it's one and then the other, where you're just like, well,
and there's no like medication like we talked about in our Fanica episode,
Yep.
where it's just like, okay, this is managed. Like it's not,
Yep.
like what a Grover Cleveland Alexander experiences. So he comes back. Could you imagine what his numbers would have been? Just say we stay out of the war, or he didn't get drafted. Like Hornsby has to go and work because he has nobody in his family to support.
Yep.
Like he just keeps pitching.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because his form kind of declines after that for all of the reasons we just said.
Which would destroy a normal person.
Exactly.
So May 11th, 1919, comes back pitching for the Cubbies. Loses his first 5 decisions, but still finishes 16-11 and has an MLB leading 9 shutouts.
Yep.
Mind you, he's returning from the Western Front, showing back up in Major League Baseball and blanking the National League.
Well, it must be weird because they had a lot of guys come back and some guys just didn't go. So I bet there was weird division in the locker room where it's like, oh, those guys are crazy, you know?
Yeah, those guys are pussies.
Exactly.
Someone doesn't have night terrors, la-dee-da.
Yahoo, Mr. Fancy Pants.
Someone got to work at a factory. Anyway, 1920, this was his last Triple Crown. So he has a Triple Crown season
After
fighting the Germans. So 27-14, 1.91 ERA, 33 complete games, 363.1 innings pitched.
Well, I wanted to say this because he has the Triple Crown in 1920, but if you go through all the stats, he's literally the number one on everything.
Yeah.
So it's not just the three top. He literally has, if the 20s is insane, complete games, innings pitched, like you said, strikeouts, ERA. It's quite a ridiculous season a year from trench warfare.
Exactly. And at this point, though, from about 21 to 25, you start seeing, it's not that he falls off a cliff. It's just, God, what could have been. But his drinking's picked up.
Yep.
His arm isn't what it used to be. But because what he did keep through the rest of his career was that pinpoint control. So there's zip on his fastball isn't quite there anymore.
Yep.
But his control is awesome, and he's a smart enough dude how he knows how to mix his pitches, and the movement on these breaking pitches are really allowing him to succeed. Like you brought up, he's basically just Greg Maddux with a BAC of 0.2. Mm-hmm. It's a really good comparison for this juncture of his career. So over these 5 seasons, he wins 80 games. Has 98 complete games over the span and still has a respectable 3.34 ERA. And the reason it rises, not necessarily because he's declining, we're out of the Deadball era.
Out of the Deadball era, and the Cubs are horrible.
Yes.
So it's all
So
of
they're
that.
like the Cubs
So
for about a century.
It's like saying rural Nebraska. We don't have to specify
It's
that
just
first
Inglorious
part.
Bastards. You just say bingo.
That's right. Yes, he's gotten they say this with his alcohol increasing, that he really is almost becoming a problem in the locker room.
Yeah. But I mean, how do you, you can't diagnose him with PTSD. You're giving him the appropriate help. Mm-hmm. He's already got a drinking problem. He's already an epileptic. He's seen probably some of the most horrific shit a human being could see on a battlefield. So there's really nowadays the tools are in place to help just regular people like that. But how do you do that with a pitcher? And he's still going out there and winning games.
I know.
So 26, Joe McCarthy, we talked about in our Hack Wilson episode.
Yep.
This is right before Hack gets there, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He's the new manager. He didn't like Grover's drinking. He didn't quite fancy him like old Hack.
Well, and I saw that he kind of felt like it was bad influence for everybody else, because at this time he's kind of a veteran in this league, and you really are looking at him to set an example, and he just can't because of all this shit.
Yeah. And I mean, Hack, so many things working against him that you're just oh God.
Yep.
I did want to add, though, it's still prohibition going on, so good for you for copping that booze there.
Yep.
Old Pete.
Well, I mean, he's in Chicago.
That's very true. He comes to Maya. I go to his place. Why can't he come to mine?
That's
Chris?
right. That's right.
So it's through 7 starts. He's 3-3. Has the 3.46 ERA, and McCarthy's sick of him. He's traded to St. Louis for a waiver price,
which is not a lot.
Not a lot. But who's managing the Cardinals? Somebody had done an episode on.
I want to say what he said. He goes, and if we finish last again, I'd rather do it without him. Wow. That's really what he said, because he was just we finished last year. I'd rather just do this again and not have to worry about him.
That's crazy considering what we talked about. Because when I was reading, I was saying he was Hack Wilson's biggest, he's the one that stuck up for him more than anybody.
Yep. And that's what I mean, where it was more of a mental thing as opposed to him being just a ridiculous drunk, I feel like.
That's, you know what? That's true. Because it's not cheeky and fun shenanigans.
No, it's evil shenanigans.
Cruel and tragic.
Hey, what's that place you like to go to with all the fun shit on the walls?
Big cheese sticks.
Talking about shenanigans? You guys talking about shenanigans?
Cap, you know I'm not a pro-union guy.
So who was the Cardinals manager?
So we did an episode on him. If you go back, it's a great one. Great best second baseman in MLB history. I'll point that out. Rogers Hornsby is the player manager.
And I feel like he can manage him because it just like some people just fit together.
And I feel like Hornsby, he might have had some trouble with Pete. He didn't have trouble with barely any pitchers, but I think he knew what was left, and he knew exactly what would get him over the hump because unlike the Cubs, who were in last place, the Cardinals are in a pennant race for the NL. He ends up going 9-7 down the stretch, 11 complete games, and the Cardinals make the World Series.
I was going to say, they win the NL pennant. They go to the World Series against a very stacked Yankees team.
This is right before Murderer's Row.
Yep.
And ruining the poor Wayner's dreams.
And this was my thing was he didn't have a great season like we saw before.
No.
As soon as he got to the World Series, he was lights out.
He needed this. He not just for baseball and his baseball legacy, but like for his soul.
Yep.
He needed this World Series in his performance. So in games 2 and 6, he takes the mound. Complete game 2, it's a complete game. Mm-hmm. 10 strike. Mind you, he's not a strikeout guy. Never was, even during his granted, he's leading the league, but he's not leading it with tons of them.
No, yeah.
So 10 strikeouts, gives up 2 runs. Game 6, they're down 3-2. This is an elimination game. If he loses, their season's over. Another complete game, 2 runs and 6 strikeouts, and he tells Hornsby after game 6, look, I'm there for you. Like Randy Johnson in game 6 with the Diamondbacks. I'm there if you need me.
And he tells Hornsby that, but then he goes out game 6 that night and he gets hammered.
Which you did just pitch a complete game and defeat the New York Yankees.
Thank you.
I think it's
warranted.
I think it's warranted if you don't take it too far.
Oh, all right.
But
comes back the next day for game 7.
Yes, he does.
And Cardinals pitcher, I didn't see who that was. Do you have the...
not the pitcher, but his catcher, Bob O'Farrell, said, yeah, it was...
That's who it was, Bob O'Farrell. Because the starting pitcher got a blister on his finger.
Yes, but
Bob O'Farrell said, literally, he was just like, we put Grover in the game, old Pete, and you could tell he was still affected by the drinking from last night.
I tell you what, though, Chris, I've done some of my best sets hungover.
Yep.
Like, just feeling it from the night before. It's the next night.
Yeah.
But you know what? You dig deep.
Well, sometimes
it forces you to dig deep sometimes. I'm not saying you need to be hungover when you do everything, but sometimes it gives you that little extra.
Well, my thought was maybe he didn't get off that train because sometimes when you...
Well, sometimes you need a little pick-me-up.
That's right.
Along the way.
A little scale of the dragon that burnt you, if you know what I mean.
Oh, a little hair of the dog.
Oh, man. So he comes in...
Him. I do want to add, though, him and his wife both contend that he was stone cold sober.
Yes.
So
it's like I was going to say, like we're kidding about this. Game 7, he was sober.
Yeah,
but hungover.
But hungover, yes. Like we're not disputing the partying, but he wasn't, getting hammered. But so in the bottom of the 7th, the bases are chucked,
and they're up 3-2.
They're up 3-2 in the game, and Tony Lazzeri, push him up, comes up to the plate. Hall of Famer, also someone who suffered from epilepsy. It's what he died of.
Yeah,
oddly enough.
And then Hornsby comes out.
Hornsby comes out to the mound, and they're going over kind of strategy. He's like, Alex, I want you to get a strike on an inside fastball, and then Alexander says, "All right, but he's going to get a strike, and on the second pitch, he's going to throw him an inside fastball." Hornsby knows that's Lazzeri's favorite pitch, but Alexander thinks he can get it by him enough to where he'll foul it off if he doesn't swing and miss. And Hornsby had one of the best quotes where he said, "Who am I to tell you how to pitch?"
It's literally the manager going up there being like, no, you're right. You know your craft. I'll just let you. It's like if he went out with him the night before and was just like, whoa, you shouldn't be drinking that. He's just like, this is my craft.
Yeah, like, you know what? You've done it for this long. I struggled hitting you. Do whatever the hell you want to.
That's right. So the Yankees go scoreless. He literally holds... This is what I mean. Wins game 2, wins game 6, comes in 7th inning game 7, and holds the Yankees scoreless.
Well, so what happens in the bottom of this? So what happens is Lazzeri at bat. First pitch strike. Second pitch was a ball. Third, he tries to jam him with that inside fastball, and Lazzeri almost hits it out of the park.
Yeah, it's a foul ball that probably would have went.
I mean, yeah, that's just a long strike.
Yeah.
And then he ends up whiffing him. And then he goes down in the order. bottom of the 8th, 3 up, 3 down, and then the bottom of the 9th, the first 2 guys ground out, and then Babe Ruth comes up.
And he gets on.
He get very controversial. Some people think he struck him out. So he gets on with a walk, and on the first pitch he runs, and we talked about in the Hornsby episode, he gets thrown out.
Babe's not known for his base stealing ability.
He thought he could catch him napping.
Yep.
He wanted to
That's
get
exactly
in
what it was.
scoring position just so a single would give him a chance to win. Mm-hmm. And Hornsby tags him out, pulls the whole Kenny Powers. You're fucking out.
Yes, seriously.
And he wins the world. If they kept the record for World Series MVP, he probably would have won it.
I agree. I mean, how could he not with
Right.
that showing?
So 1927 has a really good year.
Yeah, yeah, 20 wins.
Yeah. 22 complete games. Only 48 strikeouts, though, which is, I think just after that World Series, it started,
It started to decline.
Yeah.
And drinking really did start to increase again here.
And, has a bad World Series that year, I believe, against in 28, he made the World Series again, and they lost the Yankees. That year, he did pitch his 90th and last shutout of his career. He lost Game 2 in the World Series. 29, he goes 9-8, and he won his last game as a professional. Mm-hmm. That was it. He comes back to the Phillies in 1930, but after a December trade that year. But it was just like, that was it. That was it for him, which is just really sad.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where you could tell they didn't bring him to retire there, which is kind of a thing now. They brought him to be like, oh, maybe you could do it. And I imagine he showed up and they're like, oh, you're done.
Yeah.
You got to hang this up, bud, because you're just not in the right mental state.
And he tried catching on in the Texas League.
He played in some Negro leagues.
In the House of David League. There was a sad story. Someone went up to him and said, "Aren't you Grover Cleveland Alexander?" And he said, "Yeah, I used to be."
Yep. Which is, you're right. That's
like the depressing Tony Danza line in Angels in the Outfield. Mm-hmm. I laugh at Tony Danza.
I laugh at him.
But the post-baseball career was just as crazy as the baseball career. Like, he's in sanitarium after sanitarium. His wife's divorcing him, getting back together with him, on and off. In 1930, a man in St. Paul, Minnesota, sued him for $25,000 for being a love pirate.
I didn't understand what that was.
No, like I'm assuming just a serial adulterer.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining Captain McAllister from The Simpsons, like, yar.
Yar.
I smell pussy off the starboard bow.
They call me the love pirate.
God. But no, it's just he's doing odd jobs. He's barely.
I was just going to say
in a flea circus, recreating his 26 world. Like it's basically what all these pensions and programs are meant to help professional athletes now, because this is like some of the worst of it.
Yes, because he literally takes what would be considered odd jobs for the rest of his life almost. Like I think he opens up a bar with a guy.
Yeah.
But still, like, you can tell it's like he shouldn't be opening up a bar.
They had to create a pension for him in the National League, paying him $50, like the card, like just so he could, like just so he could
survive.
By.
Yeah.
He was in the first class though of MLB Hall of Famers, 1939, June 12th. He was later quoted as saying, "I'm in the Hall of Fame and I'm proud to be there, but I can't eat the Hall of Fame."
It's so
tragic
depressing.
is that shit? Oh my God. Mm-hmm. Having lots of health issues due to the epilepsy, due to the drinking, due to the PTSD. He had a heart attack at the Red Sox and Cardinals World Series.
I saw that.
Leaving.
He went like game 3 or something, and he literally had a heart attack. And it's early for him in his life to have a heart attack. You know what I mean? Like,
He ended up developing cancer on his right ear by 1950. There at the World Series in New York. And then on November 4th, 1950, he mailed a letter to Amy saying he was happy to meet her in Kansas City. They were going to meet back up again.
Yeah, his wife who married, divorced, just to be clear.
Yeah. And then he ends up dying. He just dies there in St. Paul, which is, in a way, it's almost peaceful for him, but in a way, you're just like, good Lord.
It's just such a sad thing that we really didn't know how to like deal with these people coming back from war, and then deal with this like excessive drinking and like shit like that, where teams just traded him when they were done with him. They didn't like help him get better or anything like that.
Well,
And-
before Kurt Flood, you were property. I
Yeah,
mean, you were the
that's-
team. Like you were perpetually signed to 1-year deals.
Yes, exactly. But again, I have to bring it back. The ban Franz Ferdinand really screwed everybody over with that shit.
I hate that Franz Ferdinand. Governor stats: 373 wins. That is tied for third most of all time. Tied with Christy Mathewson, another player whose career was basically fucked and a half over by the First World War and serving there. 2.56 ERA, 436 complete games, 90 shutouts, 3-time Triple Crown winner, 5-time ERA title. He hit 11 dingers as a pitcher. I didn't want to bring that up.
He also was a good fielding pitcher.
Yeah,
that was
just like
something
Greg
else.
Maddux. He's Greg Maddux with a BAC of .2 there at the end.
That's what I love.
1926 World Series would have been the World Series MVP. Since he didn't wear a number, the Phillies just retired him, essentially. And he's in the Hall of Fame of both the Cubs and Phillies. Like, one of the, like I said before, it's the control which would have put him, you could have put him in any decade in Major League Baseball history, and he would have done the same thing.
Well, it's so telling after he comes back from the war and his arm is kind of blown and he's still the top pitcher.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, that's all control.
And just no war. He probably could have gotten in that 450 range. Probably a wins. But I mean, we'll never know. But just holy cow! What an amazing research.
Yeah,
doing
great. This was one of. I had a lot of fun researching Grover Cleveland Alexander, one of the greatest pitchers of all time.
That's right.